Mara Whitlow wasn't new to danger. As a wildlife photographer, she had camped alone in grizzly country, weathered blizzards in an unheated Jeep, and once hiked 3 days with a sprained ankle just to get the perfect shot of a lynx. But that October, she brought her 15-year-old son Eli with her, his first trip after years of saying no. They were headed into the San Juan Mountains, just a weekend hike, maybe 2 nights out. Locals remembered the boy's shy smile at the Ridgeway gas station and the mother's steady voice asking about trail conditions. They signed the logbook at Williams Creek Trailhead at 2:14 p.m. on October 17th. Rangers said conditions were ideal. No storms, no missing signage, nothing that would suggest a threat. Yet neither Mara nor Eli ever came down. No one heard a scream. No gear was found. It was as if the mountain had erased them. Search crews arrived within 36 hours. Dozens of volunteers, helicopters, thermal drones, even cadaver dogs were deployed across the basin and tree lines. But the forest held tight. No footprints past mile 4. No campfire remains. No torn cloth snagged on branches. Mara's Subaru was towed from the parking lot 2 weeks later, untouched. Her phone last pinged a tower on the North Ridge, the same place searchers focused on. And then, just silence. For 5 years, their faces remained taped to bulletin boards in ranger stations. Candlelight vigils flickered out. Eli's classmates graduated. Reporters moved on. But those closest to Mara knew she would have never gone off trail, and she never would have put Eli in danger. Something didn't add up. The mountain hadn't just swallowed them. It had hidden something. On a crisp September morning 5 years later, 2 hikers from Denver were filtering water near a narrow ravine, half a mile off the original search grid. One of them dropped a bottle that tumbled into a crevice between 2 granite slabs. When she climbed down to retrieve it, she found something wedged in the shadows. At first, it looked like trash. Blue nylon, weathered and torn. But as she pulled gently, she realized it was a camera harness, stiff from years of exposure. Her friend shined a phone light deeper into the gap. That's when they saw the lens. Still intact, covered in dust, but unmistakably professional. Scratched on the back, barely visible beneath dirt and moss, were the initials, M.W. They didn't know it yet, but they had just cracked open the silence. Park rangers arrived at the site by mid-afternoon, responding to the hikers' call with quiet urgency. The camera, though weather-beaten, was surprisingly intact. It had been lodged deep in the rocks, protected from snow, rain, and predators. The strap had frozen stiff, but the body was sealed tight. A tech from the search division pried it open on site, breath held, hands gloved. Inside, a memory card. Old, dusty, but not cracked. They packed everything into a secure box and airlifted it back to the base in Durango. The hikers were asked to keep quiet, not out of secrecy, but caution. If this was what they thought it was, media attention would return fast and loud. That night, in a dim room at the ranger station, the card was loaded into a laptop. Then the screen lit up. 142 files, mostly photos, dated October 17th, 2020. The final image was timestamped 7:04 a.m. It showed Eli, squinting towards something out of frame, eyes wide, shoulders tense. And behind him, in the blurred background, a silhouette not yet identified. The discovery reignited the entire case. The FBI reopened the file the next day. Mara's brother, Daniel Whitlow, received a call he hadn't expected in years. He didn't cry. He just asked if they had her scent. The national media picked it up within hours. Old footage of Mara with her telephoto lens, Eli on her shoulders at age 5, flooded the internet again. But the question wasn't just what happened. It was who else had been out there. Experts analyzed the shadow in the final photo, using software to stabilize and zoom. It wasn't an animal. The frame captured something long and upright, possibly a person. The angle suggested distance, but the posture was deliberate. One arm hung oddly. Park officials combed missing persons lists, wilderness permits, and known wilderness dwellers, but nothing matched. That photo, and that camera, had survived 5 brutal winters. It hadn't just endured, it had waited. Daniel arrived in Durango 2 days later. He didn't talk to press. Instead, he asked to hike the trail himself, retrace their steps. The rangers objected at first, citing terrain instability, but he pushed. Mara wouldn't have run, he told them. She wouldn't have gotten lost. Something stopped them. On October 5th, Daniel and 2 rangers began the ascent up Williams Creek. He paused at the logbook, the same page his sister signed 5 years earlier, still legible beneath plastic. Then he climbed. The path felt familiar, like a wound reopening. Halfway up, at a sharp switchback near a fallen pine, Daniel stopped cold. This isn't where she'd camp, he whispered. Too exposed. She'd go higher. And they did. By sunset, they reached a ridge with a broken view of the valley below. And there, buried under a cairn that hadn't been noted in any past search report, was something strange. A piece of fabric, not blue, not red, but camouflage. Daniel knelt beside the cairn as the rangers carefully pulled away stones. The camouflage fabric was from a weatherproof tarp, military grade. Beneath it was flattened earth, dry despite recent rain. Someone had built a makeshift lean-to here once. The dirt bore impressions, old but distinct. Square outlines of a cot, a boot heel, and something heavier. There were no food wrappers, no tent poles, nothing to trace. But this camp hadn't been marked during the original search. A mistake? Or had it been missed on purpose? One ranger radioed for backup. The other took photos, tagging coordinates. Daniel walked a few paces away, drawn to something glinting under pine needles. It was a cracked metal ring. He brushed it off. It was Mara's tripod mount. She always kept it screwed to a camera when hiking. If the camera was found in the ravine, and the mount was here, something, or someone, had separated them. That night, back at base, Daniel was given a tent and left alone. He didn't sleep. He replayed old voicemails from Mara. In one, dated just a week before the trip, she spoke of Eli finally opening up during long walks. "He's not a kid anymore, Danny," she'd said. "He's starting to ask the hard questions about the divorce, about his dad, about me." Daniel remembered how Mara had grown more cautious in recent years, especially after a run-in with a stranger during a photo shoot in Idaho, a man who watched her for hours but never spoke. She'd brushed it off at the time, but now, he wondered, had someone followed her? Had someone been watching from the trees even then? The final photo of Eli didn't show fear. It showed recognition, like he knew who was out there. The next morning, the rangers expanded the grid around the tarp site. 30 yards downhill, a K9 unit found bones. Animal, they thought at first. But the forensic team confirmed one tibia belonged to a juvenile human. DNA would take time, but everyone knew. Eli. Nearby, they uncovered a rusted axe head and something even stranger, a buried canister filled with old photos. Grainy, black and white, most taken decades ago. Some were of landscapes, some of people. One photo stopped them cold, a cabin heavily obscured by trees, with a shadowy figure standing in the doorway. He wore a parka. His face was barely visible, but his eyes, sharp, direct. The rangers flagged the location in the background. If they were right, that cabin lay somewhere west, deep in the uncharted part of the basin. The only problem? That area had been closed off since 1992, after a landslide. No trails, no roads, and officially, no structures. At least not anymore. The photo was unlike anything they'd seen. It was dated 1996 on the back. The ink faded, but still legible. Rangers scanned every archive available: Forest Service records, geological surveys, even declassified mining maps. Nothing mentioned a cabin in that area. Officially, the 12 square mile zone west of the basin had been declared unstable after a rockfall in '92, with no further patrols logged. But the photo didn't lie. The tree lines matched. The ridge crest was identical. There had been a structure hidden in the folds of the mountain. Daniel insisted they follow the terrain west, even if the paths no longer existed. Reluctantly, the search team agreed. They brought climbing gear, satellite phones, and an emergency chopper on standby. Daniel hiked ahead in silence. For the first time in 5 years, he felt the pieces were no longer scattered. They were pointing in one direction, toward a place never meant to be found. 2 days into the off-grid hike, the forest changed. Pines gave way to twisted aspens. Animal tracks disappeared. The silence grew thicker, unnatural. The team stopped speaking without realizing it. On the third morning, fog settled low. A ranger spotted something half buried in brush, wood, weathered and grey. They cleared branches and unearthed a collapsed roofline, nearly invisible from 10 feet away. The cabin was real. What stood of it had been hand-built, logs stacked without nails, moss choking the walls. A single rusted lantern hung from a broken rafter. Inside, it was dry, dusty, undisturbed, and on the floor was a child's wool glove, red, small, with a patch stitched onto the wrist. A bear cub in a forest. Daniel sank to his knees. He had bought that glove for Eli's birthday, weeks before they vanished. Mara had sent him a photo of Eli wearing them near the trailhead. There was no mistaking it. Eli had been here. Behind the cabin, they found a root cellar. Its door was reinforced with steel bands, chained from the outside. Someone hadn't wanted it opened, or hadn't wanted something to come out. Daniel stared at the rusted chain, his pulse climbing. A ranger approached slowly and cut the links. The cellar door groaned open. The air was cold, stale, like the inside of a sealed tomb. A narrow stairway led down into blackness. Flashlights flickered. The walls were lined with hand-carved etchings, symbols, crosses, names scratched into stone. At the bottom, they found a bedroll, decayed clothing, and a small journal sealed in a waterproof bag. Inside the journal, the handwriting changed halfway through. The early entries were careful, scientific. The later ones, disoriented, scrawled. One line repeated again and again. He comes at night. He waits until we sleep. He knows we can't leave. Then, a signature, M.W. The final page was dated October 22nd, 2020. That was 5 days after Mara and Eli were supposed to be gone. They airlifted the journal out that night. Specialists from Quantico arrived within 48 hours. Every page was scanned, analyzed for fingerprints, ink origin, even emotional state through pressure patterns. The handwriting in the final entries was confirmed to be Mara's. Tight, controlled in the beginning, then descending into loops and slants. One passage stood out. He lives above the ridge. We saw the smoke first. Eli thought it was from hikers. I told him no one was supposed to be here. That's when we heard the music, old, scratchy, like it came through water. Then Eli screamed. The next pages described their attempt to flee, being watched from afar, hearing footsteps that didn't match any animal gait. The last legible words, "He knows we're trying to leave. Camera is with Eli. If anyone finds this, don't go higher, please." But they had already gone higher, and now it was too late to turn back. That same day, the excavation team uncovered a second hidden path leading north from the cabin. Overgrown, choked with roots, but walkable. It led toward a higher ridge shrouded in clouds. Satellite scans of that zone showed something odd. Heat signatures inconsistent with vegetation. Daniel insisted they follow it. Rangers hesitated, citing unstable terrain. But once again, Daniel pressed. My sister said not to go higher, but she knew someone would. That's why she left the warning. They began the ascent. The fog thickened. Trees leaned unnaturally, as if pulled by something. 40 minutes in, they reached a clearing. Dead center was a chimney. Just a chimney. No structure attached. Beneath it, a scorched fire pit. Scattered around were animal bones, some cracked open. And hanging from the trees, high and out of reach, were dozens of objects swaying in silence. Gloves, canteens, strips of fabric, even a child's backpack. Eli's name was stitched on it. Inside the pack were 5 rolls of undeveloped film wrapped in wax paper. A ranger with darkroom training prepped to process them back at the station. But one photo had already been removed, torn at the edge, found in the chimney's ash. It was burned along one side but still visible. Eli's face, panicked, looking over his shoulder, mouth mid-scream. In the background stood a man, barefoot, gaunt, eyes wide, body streaked in ash or mud. He wasn't holding a weapon. He wasn't even close. But there was something wrong. His proportions off, limbs too long, mouth too wide. Daniel stared at the image until he felt cold. That's who she meant, he said. The rangers exchanged looks. They'd seen myths like this before. Regional legends, feral survivalists, cryptids whispered in mountain towns. But this wasn't a ghost story. It was a photo. They were now hunting something real, or something that had once been. At dawn, they pushed further past the chimney. The trail vanished into sheer stone and shale. Still, they climbed. Every step higher warped the sound around them. Wind didn't whistle. It howled in short, clipped bursts, as if the mountain exhaled through clenched teeth. Birds went silent. Radios lost signal. Then, near the summit, they reached what should have been an ordinary overlook. But the rock was carved. 3 deep symbols etched into the face of the mountain, unfamiliar to any ranger. Beside them, buried in moss, was an old sign. Only one word could still be read. Camp. The rest was lost to rot. Daniel stood frozen. Mara once told him she'd found a reference to a civilian conservation corps camp that had disappeared during World War II. No reports, no closures, just stopped being mentioned. He thought it was just folklore, until now. They followed the ridge's curve and came upon an opening, a flat plateau, ringed by boulders and broken pines. At its center stood something out of time, a wooden archway, rotted, held up by stones stacked unnaturally smooth. Beneath it, stairs led underground. Cold wind blew from below, sharp and metallic. The team hesitated. Daniel went first. The air inside the stairwell was colder than outside, layered with rot and rust. Lights flickered. At the base was a door, heavy and bolted shut from the outside. On the wall beside it was a name carved in messy, desperate gouges. Eli. Underneath it, still here. No one moved. One ranger finally unlatched the bolt. The door creaked open to a dry, narrow chamber. On the floor were empty water jugs, wrappers, a flashlight long dead, and in the corner, bones, small, human. They were curled beneath a jacket, Mara's. Daniel collapsed to his knees. His sister had died down here, alone, protecting someone. But the bones weren't the end. Behind the body was a wall covered in writing, scratched messages, counting days. Warnings. He comes when we sleep. The higher we go, the louder he gets. And then a final phrase repeated 3 times. He feeds on memory. The team backed away. Suddenly above them, something scraped against the stone. Heavy, dragging. Not wind. Not wildlife. They froze, ears straining. Another sound, a breath, wet and rattling. Radios crackled to life again, but with static and fragments. Hey, knows your name. Don't remember. Then silence. Something was up there. And it knew they'd opened the door. They sealed the chamber and retreated in silence. Back on the ridge, daylight had turned dim, though it was barely noon. The air was thicker, as if the mountain itself pressed against their lungs. Daniel gripped the burned photo of Eli tighter. It had become more than a clue. It was an anchor to something real, something before. One ranger, visibly shaken, muttered that he kept forgetting his wife's name. Another couldn't remember how long they'd been up here. The effect was spreading. As they prepared to descend, a shadow moved along the ridge's edge. Too fast for an animal, too fluid for human. Then came the sound. Distant music, muffled like from a gramophone underwater. It matched what Mara wrote. Something was still watching. Or worse, following. They made it halfway down the mountain when the fog rolled in again. But this time, it was wrong. Not just thick, but alive. Shapes drifted within it, not solid, but almost visible. Daniel called out for Eli, once. Just once. The fog reacted, swirling like breath around a flame. Then something answered. A voice, not loud, but inside his head. Familiar. Dad said you'd come, but you're late. Daniel froze. That voice wasn't Eli's, but it remembered him. Behind them, the others staggered. One ranger dropped to his knees, shaking. Another fired a flare blindly into the mist. The light didn't rise. It just vanished. Radio contact died again. Compass needles spun. One by one, the team began forgetting why they were there. Only Daniel held steady, gripping the final journal page Mara had written. It read, "He can't take what you refuse to give. Remember who you are." In the chaos, Daniel pressed forward toward a narrow canyon where the fog seemed thinner. He thought he saw movement, small, quick. A figure darting between stone walls. He gave chase, boots slipping on wet shale, heart pounding. The trail ended at a hollow in the rock, barely big enough to crawl through. Inside, it was dry, shielded from the wind. And in the center sat a boy. Dirty, thin, older than Daniel remembered, but unmistakably Eli. He didn't look up, just stared at a wall covered in carvings, repeating words under his breath. Day 1, Day 2, Day 3. Daniel whispered his name. The boy flinched, then turned. His eyes were hollow, too old for his age. He kept taking things, Eli said. First my voice, then her songs, then her face. But I kept one thing. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a single Polaroid, a photo of Mara, smiling, holding baby Eli. This, he said, he couldn't eat. And in that moment, Daniel understood. Memory wasn't just how the thing hunted. It was also the only weapon they had left. Daniel reached for his nephew, unsure if the boy was real or some echo. But Eli leaned into his chest like he had never left. His skin was cold, his frame fragile. He comes when I forget, Eli whispered, when I lose who I am. Daniel understood then that the thing feeding on memory didn't just haunt the mountain. It was part of it, living in its silence, in every forgotten footprint, every lost trail. Daniel pulled out the journal, opened Tamara's final message, and read it aloud. As her words filled the hollow, Eli trembled, then stilled. The fog outside retreated slightly. The wind paused, naming her, remembering her. It mattered. Outside, the remaining rangers regrouped, shaken but alive. Eli was weak, but responsive. When medics arrived by air hours later, they struggled to explain his survival. Malnourished, yes, but no frostbite, no severe injuries. His last physical markers dated back months, yet he spoke of all 5 years. Time hadn't passed the same way for him. As they lifted off the ridge, Eli whispered, "Don't look back." Daniel obeyed. So did the others. Only the wind turned, as if watching them go. Days later, geologists surveyed the area again. The ridge where the cabin once stood, gone, collapsed, buried. No trace. It was as if the mountain had closed the door itself. In the weeks that followed, Eli stayed with Daniel. Slowly, his memory returned. He remembered his mother's voice, her hands, the way she said his name. But gaps remained, entire days missing. He spoke of shadows that whispered, rooms that changed shape, and a voice that said, "Forget, and you'll be safe." But he hadn't forgotten. He'd held onto one photo. That resistance saved him. When interviewed by authorities, Eli asked one question: how many others went missing there? The ranger gave no answer. But that night, Daniel searched. Dozens of cases, hikers, researchers, a CCC crew in the 40s, all unsolved. All centered near that same invisible circle. Now, officially, the mountain is closed. But Daniel knows that isn't enough. Some doors don't stay shut, and some shadows don't want to be forgotten. Some stories demand to be remembered, not just for closure, but for justice. Eli survived because someone refused to forget him. Mara died making sure her son's memory stayed intact. And somewhere in the Rockies, a silence still waits to feed on what we leave behind. At Hidden Justice, we tell the stories others bury, of people lost, of truths hidden, of justice delayed but never denied. Subscribe now to uncover what lies in the shadows, and join us as we bring light to the forgotten. Stay with us, because memory, like justice, must be protected.